Welcome to day three, the third and final day here of Africa Energy Week 2025. My name is Oliver Dixon. I'm your program director here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all here. I see some people are still trickling in. So it's going to be a fantastic day here on the stage. The focus here as we start out this morning will be on ESG, very specifically within the African context. The world has sort of approached ESG as a one-size-fits-all approach, ignoring the realities of African nation states with their specific needs when it comes to their social and environmental, as well as economic imperatives. And it's important that we're able to talk about ESG frameworks in a way that take that into cognizance, and I think that's able to cater for that. Because ESG, the ratings, the scorings, the frameworks have become an important part of the investment case and the business case when we talk about Africa's energy independence and its energy future. And hopefully we'll be able to comb through all of that minutiae today and be able to get an understanding of ESG collectively that fits the African story so that we can make energy poverty history by 2030. We're going to be starting out with a conversation this morning focused on the bureaucracy, whether ESG really is bureaucratic or is it a bridge in tailoring a global ESG approach for African realities. The moderator for this panel discussion will be Olivia-Jean Jeje, Corporate Communications Manager at Aveon Offshore. Can we give a big round of applause as welcome Olivia onto the platform? Ayatollah Jagun, Chief Corporate Services Officer at Owando Alpes PLC. I see Ayatollah has a bit of a fan club here in the front row. Send a WhatsApp text to all your friends. Please, guys, come support. Sarah Burns, who is the founder and CEO of Near Impact Invest. Sarah, it seems like your fan club chose the back right corner. Chioma Yvonne Afe, Director for External Affairs and Social Performance at Seplet Energy. All of you are the fan club. Enjoy. Thank you very much. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion titled Bureaucracy or Bridge, Tailoring Global ESG Approaches for African Realities. ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is gaining influence across Africa's energy sector. Globally, it is seen as a guide for responsible business. But here in Africa, applying these global standards without adapting them to our realities can feel more like bureaucracy than progress. For companies operating in today's volatile and connected world, sustainability and ESG are no longer optional ideals. They are strategic imperatives for managing risk. So we ask, how can ESG become a bridge, not a barrier, for inclusive growth and lasting commercial success? So over the next 45 minutes, we'll be demystifying what ESG is and challenge the idea that ESG is just a tick boxing exercise. You'll hear how African businesses are reshaping ESG into something practical, powerful, and locally relevant. We'll explore how tailored ESG strategies can drive competitive advantage, attracting investment, talent, and trust. We'll look at how data, AI, and digital tools are helping companies move from uncertainty to insight, making ESG reporting more accurate, scalable, and meaningful. And most importantly, you'll hear real stories from African businesses that are not just complying with ESG, they are competing with it. So our mission is clear. We're here to shift the conversation from passive compliance to bold action. By the end of the session, you'll be equipped and inspired to navigate your own ESG journey with clarity, confidence, and a focus on the future. Together, we can turn ESG into a true catalyst for sustainable progress in Africa. We'll dive right into the questions. So, the first question will be to Ayatollah. Many global ESG frameworks were developed in and for mature markets. How can how can African businesses and operators effectively translate these frameworks to align with unique local realities?
Thank you, Olivia. And I'm going to kind of strip things back why ESG is important for African companies, particularly energy companies. It provides a benchmark. I think for us to be able to compare ourselves with other companies, especially when we're competing for resources and investment. And so this is where it becomes important that these frameworks that were developed in more, I would say, northern climes, make sense for us in Africa so that we are reporting our impact and we're not just ticking the box, and also we're not compelled to greenwash just to be able to compete for those resources. One of the I'll give an example. When it comes to access to energy, we're told 57% of Africa does not have access to energy. And I sometimes wonder, is it really 57%, or is it actually much less than that? Because when you talk about the criteria for access to energy, you're talking about affordability, and you're talking about clean energy to be able to, you're talking about electricity,
Mhm.
clean cooking as well. And then if I just go by my own home, I know what my energy bill is every month. And I know how affordable energy that, in quotes, that I get through the grid, how, what that means in terms of access, right? Access has to be consistent. Access has to be affordable. And we don't have consistent, affordable energy in Nigeria, let me speak, and across Africa, you know, where you have grids that collapse regularly.
Mhm.
That that's not access.
Mhm.
So sometimes when we talk about access in England, what access means in England, what access means in North America is very different from what access means in Africa. And that's just an example. So when we talk about these reporting frameworks, whether it's SASB, whether it's GRI, and we at Owando report to GRI, there has to be a local context through which we view all the obligations, reporting obligations, through which we view even the criteria that we're reporting against. We have to be able to contextualize it to our communities. Interestingly, I was in some of our field locations, and we were talking about some of the health and safety risks.
Mhm.
We're talking in one part of our location, when you talk about snakes and how you deal with snakes, is very different from another location like Brass, where they worship snakes. So health and safety in Brass actually means that you don't kill the snakes. You
Mhm.
have another way to deal with, you know, your snake infestation. And it may seem like um, stories, but then they're actually real, right?
Yes.
And it's the difference between having your location shut down and not being able to produce because someone did not understand the cultural context and nuances.
Mhm.
And so again, I say that it is about the African narrative. It's about us being to dimension what ESG means to us as a people, from the environment, from the social, from the safety, from the governance perspective. And you know, there are certain things that are applicable across jurisdictions, but sometimes the things that matter, the things that will drive investment, the things that make a business case for investing in Africa are are not global,
Mhm.
and they have to be seen through the lens of potential. They have to be seen through the lens of time, and they have to be, you know, they have to be seen through the lens of culture. They also have to be seen through the lens of the journey. I always say that corporate governance is a journey that we all are on. It's a timeline, it's a journey that we all are on. America, or Chicago, I would say, or let's just even talk about America in the 70s in terms of corporate governance, it's very different from America today.
Mhm.
And America today, in terms of its corporate governance journey, is very different from Europe in terms of its corporate governance journey, much more so Africa. And when we talk about our legislators, we talk about government going to sit into these meetings where things are being discussed and decided, policies are being agreed to, the Paris Agreement, Kyoto Agreement, when these decisions are being made, it's very, very important that their voice is heard and reflected in what then comes back to us to implement in our laws, to implement in our policies locally.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Atala. Dr. Sarah, would you like to add to that and give your perspective on this?
For sure. I mean, I think what you're saying about snakes and kind of these different cultures, I think when we think about ESG, especially in kind of bigger corporations, we think about kind of, okay, what international standards do we need to align to? And I actually really encourage you to actually kind of turn that on its head and start with the community and the local area that you're working with and figure out what works for them, what is most important to them, and then you actually kind of build from there. I think a lot of people see standards as kind of tick box, very kind of set in stone. And actually, that's not the case. A lot of standards are more close to principles that if you have someone that really kind of understand the principles, you can really kind of tailor it to those local realities. But you need to take the time to go into the communities, to go into that area, and do that research. I mean, she called me Dr. Sarah because I'm a PhD. I came into this on the academic side. And I think that, you know, there's actually a lot of flexibility to make an ESG framework and system that not only works for you and your company and what you value, but also in the local context. And as you said, we're not just talking about the African local context. I mean, East, West, Central, South, I've done projects all over and so different in every place. So as I said, I really kind of urge you to turn that on its head and start at the local side and then move your way to the international standards.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. So we'll have to take the next question for Chioma. How can ESG be integrated into the core business strategy of an African company to create a competitive advantage, particularly in attracting investment and talent, both locally and internationally?
Okay. So I think I'm going to build a bit on something both of you actually said, and that is about the principles. So first of all, I think it's really around understanding what those principles are and realizing that you're not in it for the short haul. You are in it as a long-term investment. You're in it because it helps you manage risks. You're in it because it will drive returns, ultimately. So as a business, you must evaluate your status. Where do you find yourself now? So if you understand what your principles are, you understand what the ESG principles are, how they apply within your local context. It's interesting when you said about sort of turning it on its head and making it more localized, looking at your immediate community and saying, so this is the framework and these are the principles that ESG speaks to. But as a business, what is it that we want to prioritize? And so if I go back to CEPLAT, I'm going to speak from a CEPLAT perspective. If I go back to CEPLAT, I think the first thing we did was to actually ask ourselves, what do we want to prioritize? And there are three critical things we wanted to prioritize. We wanted to look at our social development, and how it is that we would engage with our communities. The second thing is our environmental care, the impact of our business within the environment. So you look at it as that. And then the third thing was maximizing returns. And it's not just to shareholders, but to all stakeholders. So when you understand the priorities of your business and you say that, then how then do you sort of unpack those various priorities going back into your business? And again, think about the fact that it's for risk management. So at CEPLAT, we did that. And then we now went back to our corporate strategy and literally rewrote our corporate strategy, saying that if this is at the heart of our business, ESG and sustainability, looking at those three key priorities, then let's go back into the business and make it make sense as business as usual. So as an African operator, we did that. We also looked at our level of governance. So everything ultimately is underpinned by governance. So with Seplat, again, as an example, what we did was we were listed about 11 years ago. So what that did for us as a business is that made us more accountable. It helped us to hold ourselves to a higher standard. So not just about the principles, not just about the framework as a tick box exercise, but saying that, look, we hold ourselves accountable to a higher, bigger standard, both markets. We will then review what it is that is important to our business, what it is that is important from a materiality perspective to our external stakeholders. And then in holding ourselves accountable and causing everyone in the business, it's a culture, everyone in the business to understand and appreciate the impact of what it is that they do and the risks that they constantly manage in the business place. Right. So we did that. And I think every other African operator should do that because then it becomes part of your DNA. So that Seplat is part of our DNA. And so that governance, corporate governance, those three priorities, the fact that we're more accountable and hold ourselves to a higher standard. At the end of the day, it not only affects our returns and our performance from a production and financial perspective, but from an organizational culture perspective and how it is that we engage with all our stakeholders from a community to vendors, to business partners, to investors, it sort of now runs through who we are. So I would ask and I would suggest to operators that when you, first of all, understand the principles, when you look at it as business for the long term, when you understand that it's a long-term investment, it's not tick box, when you look at your local context and your local communities and you adapt accordingly and prioritize what is important to you within that larger framework, I think you'll get it right.
Great. Thank you so much, Chioma. So we'll go to the next question for Dr. Sarah. A major challenge for many companies is the lack of high quality data. What are the key challenges African businesses face in measuring and reporting on ESG performance? And what roles does AI play in this space?
Thank you. I will get to the AI closer to the end because that's something I can talk about for a very long time. But I think the first thing to note is just how important this data is to decision making. I think we have very kind of set procedures and data that we collect for financial performance, for team performance. I mean, ESG, because ESG truly is risk management, you cannot make good decisions about ESG and your reputation without actually having that data. Now, of course, in Africa, this is more difficult because compared to the US, I mean, census data is not very good. We don't have a lot of high quality data. And so what that means is that it is more in the private sector's hand to help collect that data. Now, I think there's this kind of big barrier that people have when they think about, oh gosh, we got to go collect all this data and, there's a huge cost to that. I come from the academic world, and trust me, we had no money to collect data. And you can actually collect data in really innovative ways that is really cheap. So as example, one of the key things that we like to do is work with local community members who are hired. They're trained to collect that data. You're creating more employment. It's very cheap to do, and you really kind of get the whole community involved in that whole process. In Zim, for example, WhatsApp is very widely used, and we can easily reach over 1,000 people for under $100. So there's really great ways to collect this data so that you can make really good decisions. And just as an example of why does this matter, especially if we're looking at kind of costs, and unfortunately this isn't an energy example, but I was doing work on a fairly large fish farm in Mozambique, and they were really struggling with spoilage. A lot of their product was getting stolen, lots of issues there. And so they had this kind of whole plan in terms of supply chain and security, and it was going to cost them a lot of money to kind of put this in place. So I said, let's wait. Let's collect some data. Let's kind of figure out what's happening with the distributors and all this kind of stuff. And it turned out that the solution was umbrellas. Super cheap, right? And so I think that it's just really important. And again, data is not a barrier, but the private sector does have to take a little bit of a forefront here compared to in the US and Europe. The one thing I will maybe just say about AI is because we do not have good data in Africa, I mean, the AI systems, especially with kind of risk analysis, there's a lot of mistakes happening. So even with some of the companies that are listed on the JSE or NSE or all of these different kind of stock exchanges, we see mistakes in the ESG reports all the time. And so actually, I would say if you're using AI, there is actually a even higher reputational risk that you've actually made a mistake. And so I would kind of urge you, especially for your projects in Africa, AI, of course, we're all using AI for something, right? I mean, everyone's using AI, but you really do need someone with kind of that local context and expertise to at least kind of double check everything so that your company's not at an even greater risk. So that's what I would say about AI.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sarah. We'll take the question back to Chioma.
Yeah.
We're looking at ESG washing. So we wanted to know, what are the risks of ESG washing in Africa? And how can companies safeguard against superficial compliance?
Working with data, number one, how you can manage that. But there are a few risks. I think the top ones for me would be reputational damage, number one. That's the biggest thing we have. That is your currency, your reputation. So ESG, greenwashing, you lose your reputation. There are legal consequences to it as well. And the legal consequences include you claiming that you have achieved XYZ reduction in life space, where it is verified and validated not just by your company internally, but more importantly by an independent verifier. And then you have to then not just, again, tick box on the frameworks. I do this, I don't do that. I don't claim this, I claim that. But you also have some external accreditation as well. And I think the other thing would be around the fact that I earlier spoke around embedding it in your organizational culture. So when it's in your DNA and your lifeblood, and you know that you've prioritized certain things, why claim what you have not done? So you've already prioritized certain things and setting activities and campaigns on what it is you want to focus on. You're very clear on what is material to your business and what is not. And if you follow that path, phased approach, step by step, then surely you will avoid. But it's important that there's governance. And so if at the start of it, everything that you do is underpinned by governance and corporate governance, then at every point in time, you're constantly checking, and you're not just checking within your organization, but you're inviting external parties and holding yourself, accountable to a much higher standard. And so things like greenwashing then won't come up. But I'm sure there's more of that. Ayatollah or someone else can speak as to compliance,
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and thanks, Chioma, I think that there are many reasons. There's the pressure of having to greenwash for an African company is obviously based on the need to compete for finances. And you've mentioned the reputational risk of being found out. What's important, like we started off saying, is that what you're reporting against is what's relevant for you and doable for you as a business.
Yeah.
It's something also, technology is also very important in that
Mhm.
you are able to prove what it is that you're saying in terms of, the numbers you're reporting or the facts, statistics that you're reporting. But if you don't get it right first by ensuring that what you're reporting against is one, been contextualized for you, for your company, and for your country. In Nigeria, we have the Just Energy Transition Plan. As a company, you should ensure that at least your ESG targets, your KPIs, your strategy is aligned with what the country says is a priority for it. And that's what we've done at Owando in terms of how we've chosen, for instance, our renewable energy strategy, and what it is that we report on day to day. There's a bigger risk, which is the business sustainability risk. There are also operational risks because, again, if what you are measuring against, because of the fact that you want to be able to compete for finances on the terms that have been set by the funders of businesses, again, is not what is achievable, doable, or even relevant for your day-to-day business, then there is that risk of you not having a clear line of sight, that clear corporate strategy. And it's either you're being disingenuous and or you are chasing shadows, right? And so it's really important to peel back and say, look, what's important for us, even if it is not necessarily going to help us tick the box from the point of view of getting the finance we need to grow the business. But what is it that we can justify? What is it that is true to who we are, to what we do, and to where we're going? And to pray that, and to hope that as we embark on that journey, it will attract the right kind of capital, or we'll be able to innovate to be able to achieve what it is we want to achieve. But again, I have to go back to saying that we need to, whether it's industry wise or it's through talking with government and our regulators, we need to prioritize. We need to prioritize like getting our voices heard. Especially regarding what is doable, what is important for the industry to be able to grow and to be able to see that that growth that we're looking for. Look, 4% contribution to global warming. Really, if we are going to develop, there has to be some level of contextualizing these goals and these principles in a manner that just makes sense to us as Africa, to be able to, and I know I'm preaching to the converted in the room, to be able to grow at our own pace, to be able to use gas as a catalyst, to be able to obviously use the renewable energy mix, but to be able to do so in a way that from a reporting standpoint, from a day-to-day standpoint, allows us to set our own targets, to set our own KPIs, and allows us to be able to attract the funding that we need to be able to experience that growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayatollah. So we'll have the last question on that's for each of you. What is the single most important piece of advice you would give an African business or operator that is just beginning its ESG journey and wants to ensure it is a bridge to long-term success rather than just a bureaucracy?
Are you asking? I think I've just said it. I think it's really a case of, look, doing your own risk assessment as a business. You have your goals in terms of corporate goals, in terms of what you want to achieve. But from an ESG strategy perspective, you have to look at, your local context, what you need to be able to get there. And then you have to dimension it from the point of view of the environment, the protection of the environment. What does it mean to you to protect your environment? Safety, what does it mean to you? Of course, there are these global standards, and like you said, there are principles, but there is the level, there isn't a level playing field. So again, you have to contextualize it in terms of what does it mean to you and your journey. From the social side, we all have communities that in as much as they're all in, let's say in Nigeria, they can be so diverse in terms of what their requirements are and in terms of what their needs are. And you have to build that into your model. So in developing your strategy and doing your materiality assessment, in setting your own targets and your KPIs, it has to be dimensioned through where you are at the moment. And of course, there's something you're aspiring to, there's a goal you're aspiring to, but you have to start from where you are and be honest about that journey. I don't think anybody's going to be penalized for not necessarily meeting the gold standard, so long as they can show a pathway and they are honest about where they are. They can understand what went wrong and why they were not able to even achieve some of the short-term targets that they've set for themselves. It's all about transparency, accountability, and honesty. But it's also about partnership, and I think I need to talk about that as well. I think it's SDG 16, that's partnering for the goals. The need to not feel that you have to do it on your own. The need to learn from other African companies like Oando, like Seplat are in the room. The need to be able to also yesterday I was really interested or really excited when another local player came to us and said, we would like to partner with you on your CSR journey. We in Owando, for instance, our foundation partners with Sumitomo Chemicals to help Sumitomo deploy their ESG strategy in Nigeria. They actually use the foundation to deploy part of that strategy.
Amazing.
So understanding that, if you don't have boots on the ground, you can work with people who have boots on the ground. You can partner with other foundations to be able to realize what it is that you want to do in terms of giving back. So partnerships is also something that's very, very important. Both with multilaterals, both with other local companies, and certainly being able to ensure that you're on the right terms with all your stakeholders, including government as well.
Great. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Ayatollah. Dr. Sarah, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the key things for me, and one of kind of the issues I see a lot, is when people start their ESG journey, it's very focused on policy. And of course, you do need to get all of those policies in place for your company, right? You need your health and safety, your just transition, and all of those are great. But where we tend to see a big gap is within the implementation, right? So you'll have these companies that have kind of all really good policies, really good frameworks that are all put in place, but then the implementation is where things kind of start to fall apart a little bit, or it becomes a little bit difficult. And so what I would say is that implementation part is so important for a couple of different reasons. I mean, obviously, we want all these policies to be working and in place. But often what we see is that when something does happen, right, there is a major health and safety or a spill or whatever it might be, right? If you haven't fully implemented everything, then it's really difficult to go back. Right. And so, I mean, I have clients who will call me saying, this has happened in the community. Can you come in and fix it? That's much more difficult than if you're proactive about it, right? And it's also a lot more expensive to come in and fix the issues than it is to kind of proactively implement and prepare. So I think one of the key things I would talk about is, or really kind of, if you're just starting your ESG journey, is one, really focus on the implementation and do it before any of the issues kind of start happening, because as I said, it's much more difficult and it's way more expensive to be reactive compared to proactive.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So for me, I would say it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You're in it for the long haul. So phase your approach. Phase it. Agree what those key milestones are. Have a plan 3-5 years out. Understand that you can start small and there are quick wins. So to her point around implementation, there are quick things you can do around energy efficiency. There are quick things you can do around diversity and inclusion. There are quick things you can do around water waste management, just basic things within your business, within your control. The other thing is leverage the strength of your internal resource. There are people within your organization that can be trained to understand the principles and what the priorities are, and then they can then help in the execution. So if you don't think that I must go out to hire this huge consultant to come and do this work, but you understand that within your organization, you can leverage your internal resource, then you know that it's an approachable, achievable goal for you. And then the last thing is shared learning, and it's sort of what Ayatollah said. Other people have done it before you. You must be part of networks, communities. If you're an SME, SME networks, that you find that there are other mentors, larger corporations who come and speak to you. Find them, engage them, find out how they're doing it. But more importantly, how can you leverage on what it is that they've done and where they failed and where they've won? And then you can then also start to build your own story.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chioma. Since we're almost out of time, we'll close with this question. What does a uniquely African ESG success story look like in 2030? And what milestones should we be aiming for today? Let's start with Ayatollah.
So I would say it's one in which sustainable growth, or one of sustainable growth, one of shared wealth, one of development in a way that allows us to have the best of both worlds. And what do I mean by that? Leapfrog technology, like we have done before and shown in the telecoms area. I would like to see that when it comes to energy access, that we're able to leapfrog. I think it's one of equity as well, where we're able to get our share of the finances to be able to develop sustainably. It's one where we are able to not just exploit, but also process and grow to look. We have the manpower, we have the resources in terms of human resource. We have very intelligent, very experienced Africans who have been exported all over the world, who are able to come back and develop our resources, and we become a powerhouse. For me, that's what it is. We have the people, we have the natural resources. We just need the equity in terms of some of these standards, in terms of some of these global agreements and requirements. And we need a government that's switched on to understand the power that is Africa. And we just need to trust ourselves and give ourselves the time and the scope that to be able to grow and to develop on our terms. But not just on our terms for Africa, on Africa's terms, to be a solution to the problems of the world.
Dr.
Great.
Sarah, yes?
Yeah, so I think to build on that, I think Africa really has an opportunity here, especially with everything happening in the U.S. and a bit of pushback on ESG. I think Africa has a huge opportunity here to be a leader in this space, especially because development, energy access, these are all such crucial things across the continent. And I think with that, I think if, and this might be, a little bit idealistic, but I think if we're able to kind of get a lot of the big corporations, a lot of the governments, a lot of the stock exchanges together, I don't see why we need to be taking on the European standards, right? I don't see why we need to be taking on the American standards. I think there really is an opportunity for Africa to build something that works for Africa, and that is for the development of Africans. And with that, I've always said I think the S is extremely important in Africa. Obviously, environmental and governance as well, but that should really be a priority here. And I think we have an opportunity to build something new, unique to this context, and to help with the growth and development of the continent. And be able to actually use that. So that's 2030. That might be a bit of a
Push.
might be a bit of a push, but I really do think long term, Africa could be at the forefront of this.
Yeah. So I have three thoughts. The first would be intentional. That success story will be intentional. It'll be one that is embedded in the organizational culture. It's something at Seplat we're very proud that we've done. So that 2030 thing is not so far away. So it's intentional, it's in your culture, it's in your business, it's in your corporate strategy. It's innovative in the sense that it's not just adopting the global frameworks, but there's local context. So that success story in 2030 would have the S truly emphasized, local context, indigenous knowledge. We would have adopted and adapted so well that we would still be meeting our various goals, but it will be unique to the African story. And then the third thing, I think it'll be collaborative. Collaborative in the sense that it will be truly inclusive, because we would there would be no borders in terms of how it is we achieve our goal. It wouldn't be a Nigerian thing, it would be an African thing. You would have collaborated to make sure that it is truly inclusive within your local space, but also inclusive within the energy industry across Africa. So AEW is a perfect platform where we can come together and co-create what that future would look like. And so this platform, I think, should help to drive what that 2030 goal would be, to be able to co-create what that framework that speaks to Africa should be about. And then truly we would then have a resilient ESG story for Africa.
Thank you so much, Tawa. Choma. So yes, so as we wrap up, we can see, thank you so much to our panelists. We can see how compliance can evolve into competitive advantage, how data and technology can unlock new possibilities, and how African companies are leading with purpose, resilience, and innovation. The journey from bureaucracy to bridge starts with intentionality. Whether you're just beginning or refining your ESG strategy, remember, the most powerful frameworks are those rooted in local realities and driven by long-term vision. So we'd like to thank our brilliant panelists for sharing their insights, and to all of you for leaning into this discussion. Let's keep building, questioning, and collaborating, because the future of ESG in Africa is ours to define. Thank you very much.
Thank you.